The ocean wasn't supposed to take him. That's what the Coast Guard officer kept repeating as they lifted the trembling old man from the freezing waves. But before anyone knew his name, before anyone understood why an elderly man was fighting for his life in the middle of the Atlantic, he whispered something that made the rescuers freeze. "My daughter-in-law, she pushed me. My son, he wants the inheritance." And that is where the betrayal story begins. Hours earlier, long before his shaking hands clung to a rescue rope, Clarence Boyd had woken with the simple hope of a peaceful family vacation. He was 74, soft-spoken, and known in his community as the kind of man who greeted strangers as if they were already friends. After losing his wife 2 years earlier, his son Ethan had convinced him to join a short weekend cruise, insisting it would help him feel alive again. Clarence wanted to believe him. Ethan hadn't visited much lately, and when he did, he always seemed distracted, anxious, almost rehearsed. But family was all Clarence had left, so he packed his small suitcase, folded his only good sweater, and agreed. He didn't know the cruise wasn't a vacation. It was a plan. And the person steering every detail was Ethan's wife, Madison. Madison could make a smile look like a threat. She carried herself like someone used to being the center of every room, every conversation, every decision. Tall, sharp-faced, and always dressed as though she expected a camera to flash at any moment, she walked with the confidence of a woman who believed the world worked better when it listened to her. But there was one thing she could never hide, no matter how carefully she layered her charm: she hated Clarence. Not quietly. Not secretly. Not politely. She hated the fact that her husband's father was black, because it reminded her that her children, future children she constantly talked about but hadn't yet had, would not look like her. She hated the stories Clarence told about her husband's childhood because they never aligned with the polished version she wanted people to believe. She hated the way he smiled, warm and unbothered, like someone who had faced uglier things than her judgment and survived anyway. But more than anything, she hated that Clarence still controlled the Boyd family inheritance. Madison believed wealth belonged to those willing to take it. And Clarence, with his gentle hands and soft laughter, was an obstacle she'd wanted removed long before they ever stepped onto that cruise ship. The ship was already miles from shore when Clarence first felt something was wrong. He noticed it in the way Ethan avoided eye contact whenever Madison spoke. He noticed it in the way Madison kept steering conversations toward wills, trusts, and responsible planning. At dinner, Madison pushed a glass of wine toward him, her second attempt of the night. "You should try this one, Clarence. It'll help you sleep." Clarence politely declined. "Alcohol and I stopped agreeing after my late 30s. Madison's smile tightened, but she didn't push. "Not yet." Instead, she leaned toward Ethan, whispering something he didn't answer. He only stared at his plate, hands trembling under the table. Clarence reached across and touched his son's wrist. "Everything all right, son?" Ethan pulled back too suddenly. "Yeah, Dad. I'm fine. You worry too much." Clarence didn't reply. But worry curled inside his chest like a cold wind. Hours after dinner, the ship's deck was almost empty. A sharp night breeze rolled over the ocean, sending waves slapping softly against the hull. Clarence stood alone near the railing, watching the moon spread across the water like silver paint. He didn't hear Madison walk up behind him. "You're quiet tonight," she said. Clarence smiled faintly. "Just thinking." "About what?" "My boy. I don't know what's weighing on him, but I see something in his eyes. I hope he knows he can talk to me." Madison's lips curled. "Oh, he knows. He knows exactly what's expected of him." Something in her tone made Clarence look at her fully for the first time that trip. Her eyes held none of the sweetness she forced around others. They were sharp. Calculating. "You don't like me much," Clarence said softly. Madison laughed, short, cold. "You think this is about liking? You've held on to money that should have been Ethan's years ago. You cling to it like you're still 30. And what do we get? Scraps. We deserve more. Clarence swallowed, stunned. Ethan has everything he needs. I was going to give him the business. Was, she snapped. You still haven't. And you never will. Not unless something happens. Before Clarence could respond, another set of footsteps approached. Ethan. His face was pale, eyes hollow. Madison crossed her arms, watching him like a commander inspecting a soldier. Tell him, she ordered. Ethan's voice cracked. Dad. We need the inheritance. Now. Not years from now. Clarence stared at his son, heartbreak tightening every muscle in his chest. Ethan, he whispered, don't let her speak for you. Ethan clenched his jaw. She's my wife. And I'm your father. Those 4 words hung between them, so heavy the ocean breeze seemed to still. For a moment, it looked like Ethan might break, leave Madison's side, take his father's hand, choose the right thing. But Madison stepped closer to him, lacing her fingers with his. And Ethan's shoulders collapsed. I'm sorry, Dad, he said. Clarence exhaled, the sound trembling with both fear and grief. What are you sorry for? Madison answered for him. For this. In one sudden, horrifying motion, she shoved Clarence backward. His body slammed against the railing. His breath cracked. His hands scrambled for balance. But Madison's final push was merciless. The world flipped. The railing disappeared. The cold sea swallowed him whole. And as the water closed over his head, Clarence Boyd heard the last thing his son's voice would ever say to him. Forgive me. The instant Clarence hit the icy water, the shock tore every breath from his lungs. Salt burned his eyes. His chest clenched. For a moment, he didn't know which way was up, the darkness of the ocean and the night sky blending into one endless void. But his arms fought on instinct, clawing upward until his face broke the surface. The ship was already drifting away. He could see the lights, the silhouettes of people laughing on upper decks, the music, the life, all of it moving on without any knowledge that a 74-year-old man was thrashing desperately in the waves. Help! Clarence choked. Someone, please. But his voice was swallowed by the wind, the sound dying under the ship's engines. And then he saw 2 shapes at the railing. Madison and Ethan. They weren't calling for help. They weren't running for a crew member. They were watching. Madison's hand rested on Ethan's arm, like she was comforting him through a difficult choice instead of orchestrating attempted murder. Her cold stare met Clarence's struggling figure through the dark, and even from that distance, Clarence saw it. She wanted him to sink. Ethan's expression twisted with guilt, his hands shaking. He turned as if he might run, might save his father, but Madison stepped in front of him, blocking the path. Clarence tried calling again, but the ship drifted farther, the lights shrinking until they blurred into the horizon. That was the moment his hope nearly drowned. Minutes stretched into an eternity as he fought to stay above water. His limbs numbed. His breaths turned shallow. Memories flickered, his late wife's smile, Ethan as a little boy running with scraped knees and open arms, family dinners, laughter, simpler days. Not like this, Clarence whispered, the salty water splashing into his mouth. God, please, not like this. His strength began to slip. But then, faintly, he heard something. A horn. A motor. Voices. A small night patrol boat from the Coast Guard had been nearing the area on routine training when the searchlight swept across the waves, and caught the struggling silhouette of a man in the water. Man overboard, someone shouted. Within seconds, the boat sped toward him. Clarence tried to wave, but his arm barely lifted. The last thing he remembered before he went under was the blinding white light locking onto his face. When he woke, he was wrapped in blankets, oxygen mask on his face, 2 officers hovering over him. You're safe, one said gently. You're on a Coast Guard vessel. Can you hear me? Clarence nodded weakly. Sir, how did you end up in the water? Did you fall? Slip? Clarence's voice shook, barely more than a whisper. My daughter-in-law, she pushed me. My son, he wants the inheritance. The officers exchanged a look. A serious one. Because that wasn't an accident. That was attempted homicide. And it wasn't going to disappear quietly. Clarence was taken to a nearby coastal hospital. News of the incident reached the authorities. The cruise ship was contacted. A formal investigation began immediately. When officials boarded the ship at the next port, Madison acted shocked, putting on a perfect performance. Oh my God! Clarence fell. We thought he went to bed early last night. But Ethan, he couldn't fake it. His voice trembled. His eyes darted. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. The detectives noticed. Mr. Boyd, one asked, when did you last see your father? Ethan swallowed hard. We were on the deck, but I went inside early. I didn't see what happened. Madison jumped in. Ethan adored his father. He'd never let anything happen to him. Clarence must have slipped, we warned him so many times not to stand near the railing when it's wet. She clutched her chest dramatically, milking every fake tear she could summon. But the officers weren't convinced. Especially when they reviewed deck cameras. Madison didn't realize a secondary security lens faced the railing from a higher angle, a blind spot to guests, but not to investigators. The footage wasn't crystal clear, but it was undeniable. 3 figures on deck. A confrontation. A shove. A body going overboard. By the time the ship docked, both Madison and Ethan were escorted off in handcuffs. Madison screamed at the officers, insisting she was innocent. Ethan, however, broke down completely. I didn't push him, he sobbed. I didn't want to hurt him. Madison said, she told me, she said it was the only way, she said we needed the inheritance. His confession sealed their fate. But Clarence, he didn't ask for revenge. Only accountability. Only truth. When Ethan was brought to the hospital to face him, Clarence looked at his son, this broken, lost man he had raised, and something inside him cracked. Dad, Ethan whispered, collapsing into a chair. I'm so sorry. I should have stopped her. I should have protected you. Clarence didn't raise his voice. He didn't curse. He didn't ask why. He simply said, why didn't you come to me? Why didn't you tell me she was controlling you? Ethan wiped his eyes, guilt pouring out of him. I thought she loved me. I thought this was the only way to keep her. She told me I wasn't a real man if I couldn't provide, that you were holding us back, that I was failing as a husband. Clarence closed his eyes. Ethan's fear, insecurity, desperation, it all made sense now. You never had to earn my love, Clarence said. You were enough the moment you came into this world. Ethan sobbed harder, burying his face in his hands. I know, he choked. I know that now. Son, Clarence continued softly, I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. You need help. You need to rebuild the parts of you she broke. Ethan nodded, tears staining his cheeks. He knew prison was coming. He knew consequences were unavoidable.